Welcome. MMA Mobsters, episode 20. Episode 20. That's exciting. It's been a fun journey here. Episode 20, many more episodes to come. My name is Joshua Chovan. My co-host, as always, UFC Hall of Famer, inaugural welterweight UFC champion, legend Pat Miletich. How you doing, brother?
Doing great, and excited to. This is an interesting card. I found some pretty interesting fights in it, and some. I mean, it's not a earth-shattering news week or anything, but there's some interesting stuff going on.
Yeah. Before we hop into the news, how are things going up in North Dakota? I see stuff on Instagram and stuff, and talk to you. It looks like it's really cool what's going on up there. How's the farm and the living off the earth and everything that you're doing up there?
Garden's growing, chickens are out roaming around, the bees are all over the place and doing our thing.
You got bees? Are you making your own honey or something?
60,000 bees, yeah.
And that's strictly for making honey?
Yeah, and of course pollinating all the fruit and berry trees, the garden, everything else that's going on. So you gotta have all the components, man. Right?
Isn't it true? Like if every bee vanished off the face of the earth, we would all be gone in like a couple years or something. I don't know. It's something.
We wouldn't need every bee to vanish to end us. The bees are pivotal though. So pesticides are causing a lot of problems right now for bees and lowering their immune systems to things like mites and other issues. So it's the synthetic chemicals that are causing all of us health issues, right? Whether it's insects, whether it's animals, whether it's fish, whether it's human beings. It's literally all synthetic chemicals and heavy metals that are giving us issues and lowering and ruining our immune systems to defend us against everything else. So, that's what people need to wake up to if you're having health issues. Well, it's because synthetic chemicals and heavy metals are destroying your cellular and mitochondrial function, and you're not able to fend off viruses, bacteria, yeasts, molds, and anything else that would cause you some problems with your health. So there are particular substances on the planet, many of them that are organic, that pull all those toxins out of your cells and reset your immune system. So it's just a matter of educating yourself, because trust me, the system isn't going to do it for you.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I miss seeing you as much as I used to. But I do think it's very cool what you're doing up there, and you seem happy, which makes me happy. So, all right, news. We had another really bad robbery on last week's card, Pat. The main event, Kaikar France, Amir Albazi. Seemed pretty clear that France won 4 rounds to 1. I did not have a bet on the winner. I had bets on fight starts round 3 and fight starts round 4, and it was bad. It was bad, and I was doing a few things. I was at Bulldog for the fight, but I was with someone, and so was kind of back and forth. But the audible screams and groans at Bulldog from the people who were watching and were betting the fight was probably the loudest I've ever heard it in there. And I'm getting kind of tired of talking about it, buddy. We're going to continue to talk about it because it's not only a big hot topic in MMA, it directly impacts one of the main things we talk about in this show, which is MMA betting. It's fucking bad, dude. And it was 2 guys who are regular offenders. It was Chris Lee and Sal D'Amato, who were the ones who got it wrong. And again, I'm not as furious as I have been in the past, because it didn't necessarily take money out of my wallet, but it took money out of a couple of my friends' wallets who had bet on Kaikar France, because he did look very strong outside of, I believe, the 3rd round. He got taken down, put in a deep choke, thawed out of it, and really won every part of the fight except for that. We're fucking with young fighters' lives. We're fucking with fighters' families. We're fucking with MMA bettors, who I'm obviously you're you're probably more passionate about the fighters. I'm more passionate about the MMA bettors, but we're fucking with people's money, Pat, and we're fucking with people's careers and their livelihood. We've talked about this before. We'll probably talk about it again. How do we take firm action to fix this? And I'm not talking about people complaining on Twitter or Dana White complaining at the press conference, because this is something Jens Pulver talked about when he came on the show. He said people don't realize a lot of the time that Dana doesn't pick these judges. You can't really yell at Dana for this. The commission picks it. How do we fix this? Because it's to the point now where it's out of control and people are really upset. And I think that we will see some big changes, but I'm not sure what that looks like, between how much power the UFC has to make changes and then what the state commissions will do. So just your thoughts on the whole thing, because it's kind of a big damn mess. So,
well, look, no matter what, the qualifications to do and be anything in this world have dropped across the board. I mean, it's literally, they've even lowered the standards to get into, to become law enforcement officer, where people's lives truly are. They've lowered the standards for military to be able to get through boot camp, everything across the board. And I noticed this generally about human beings over the past 3 decades, where the standards and overall abilities, because people keep, kowtowing to the lowest common denominator in the room. So we have to dumb everybody down so as not to offend little Jimmy back there, who's got his finger up his ass and not paying attention. So that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the lowest common denominators. And until you remove, because a private organization, privately owned, who was overseeing fights, would be held accountable for this stuff, and those people would be getting fired. But because, and no matter what you say, I don't give a shit what anybody says, it's not political. Government entities can fuck up everything completely and not lose their jobs generally. It happens all the time. Only in the most extreme instances where they are so corrupt and it's so visible and people actually lose their lives are people held accountable. So privatization of mixed martial arts judging, refereeing, sanctioning, all those sort of things by people who are actually qualified to do it and oversee it, instead of just a bunch of suits, is really the only way to fix it. Otherwise, everybody's just going to keep complaining, and that's just the way it is. And I'm not saying that's across the board. I've seen some very good athletic commissions, very good referees out there, very good judges, all of it. But the ones that don't do their job and don't do it efficiently, in the private world, private sector, you're done. Go scrub halls, go do something else. But you're not judging fights and you're not reffing.
Yeah, and I don't get it, and I would pretty much agree with what you said, that big government does tend to get it ass backwards more than often. But I think there are so many jobs. You're cooking burgers at McDonald's, you mess up enough times, they're going to fire you. And so I don't really understand such a high profile job like MMA judge, where your mistakes can swing millions, hundreds of millions of dollars for fighter salaries, fighter careers, the betting side of it too. I don't understand why there isn't more consequences for.
Well, and again, there has to be live judging round by round that is put up on the scoreboards in the arenas, so that everybody in the whole place knows. And then, look, if I'm a guy who is completely getting it wrong after round one, round two, whatever, and I'm starting to hear everybody in the crowd going, "You're fucking blind, you're this, you're that," Yeah. Look at referees in football, referees in basketball, referees.
Oh, they take beating. That's part of what they sign up for. They're going to get dirty.
Right. Yeah. So I think the live betting would make them be a little more careful about how they view the fight.
Yeah. And That's really good, Pat. I agree with basically everything that you're saying. And we've hit on this before, and I'll hit on this again because I really liked your response. Dana White's response to live scoring is, and he kind of arrogantly answers like he tends to, like everyone's an idiot but him. He says, no, we can't fucking have live scoring in MMA. If a guy knows he's up 2 rounds to none, he's going to sleepwalk through the 3rd round, play it safe. That's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. What's your response to that?
I was calling live fights in several states, a couple different states. Kansas, I believe, was one where they were doing live scoring, and it was amazing. It was amazing. It worked out perfectly. Dana White is the leader of the largest fight organization in the world. He's not a fighter. He's not. How about conversely thinking this way? If I know I'm down 2 rounds to nothing, I'm going to go balls to the wall and try and finish the guy. How's that, Dana?
Yeah.
How's that?
Yeah. Guys get massive bonuses for big finishes. You would, agree with a lot of what Dana does. Disagree with a lot of what Dana does. That would be there. Okay, moving on. That was great, Pat. And I know that's what the people love, and a lot of you say is very spot on. I'm in full agreement with it. So when Miletich and I broke down these fights last Wednesday, like we do on Wednesday, and we've had good response to doing the podcast on Wednesday. People have more time to watch it, rewatch it. But one, and I don't know if I'd call it a downside, I like doing Wednesday, but one thing that has changed a little bit is occasionally we will predict a fight, and that fight will be a completely different fight by the time the fights start on Saturday. We had that with Jim Miller. I remember waking up Friday afternoon and then being like, where is the Jim Miller-Jared Gordon fight? Well, what happened was during weigh-ins, it came out that Jared Gordon had a concussion. Well, of course he has a goddamn concussion. Bobby Green banged his head so hard into Jared Gordon, it knocked him out. So several people are kind of have a spotlight under him here, Pat. Dana White, this is going to be a rough episode for Dana, I can already tell. Dana White threw a little temper tantrum and said that it was completely unacceptable for Jared Gordon to not disclose that he had a concussion. He was upset with Jared Gordon. He was upset with Jared Gordon's team because they didn't disclose anything, and no one really found out until, I believe it was kind of middle of the day Friday. And the UFC hustled. They found a replacement fighter. And it was interesting. This kid had no UFC experience. Jim Miller has more UFC experience than anyone in the world. And Jim Miller was only like a minus 210 favorite. Jim Miller flattened this kid in about 30 seconds. And I will give credit to the UFC that when things go sideways, they do an incredible job of making it work. They did that with the whole Khamzat, Nate Diaz, Kevin Holland thing. That went sideways. They made it work. You had your opinions on that, as you usually do. But so I'm going to say something nice about Dana, then I'm going to say something not so nice about Dana. Credit to Dana for obviously they have all these fighters. A lot of them are former LFA guys. Some are caged aggression guys that they have their numbers. They have their manager's numbers. When they need a guy to fight in 24 hours, they can do it. And how cool is that? It adds to the legend of Jim Miller. This guy, is he 40 or is he right? He's got to be 40 at this point. He is. But he's an old man, and he is not fighting like an old man. He's fighting like he's 20 again. He's ripped off I don't know how many wins in a row, and the fans love it. The fans absolutely love it. He said that he will fight at UFC 300 coming up. I believe that'll be next spring. He wants to fight at UFC 300 to kind of put a stamp on this. He is 39. He doesn't turn 40 till this August. So he will be 40 years old for UFC 300 there in April. I'm sure that they'll say that 8 million times. And 40-year-old Jim Miller He is a shoo-in to join you in the Hall of Fame someday. Most UFC, I believe, wins and fights ever. So it's a cool story. But
Well, his opponent. Go ahead.
But I don't love Dana White throwing Jared Gordon under the bus so much because Dana, you saw him get brutally knocked out by Bobby Green's big old head. What did you think would fucking happen? I mean, obviously he had a concussion. He was brutally knocked out in your cage, in your promotion, like a month and a half ago. So I don't think that all the blame lays at the feet of Jared Gordon because, I mean, what did you think he was fine? You thought that he had no concussion symptoms when he was clearly knocked the fuck out by someone's head? I didn't, and that's what Dana does. Dana,
He shouldn't have been he shouldn't have been scheduled. Period. The kid shouldn't have been scheduled. Period. So it falls on Dana instead of Dana calling that kid an idiot and saying that he revealed that he had a concussion. How about we shouldn't have booked him to begin with and say we fucked up? How's that? You know, that's just it. But I mean, Jesse Butler coming in last second. The kid's 1-2 in the KO realm. He had 8 submissions to his credit, 3-3 in decisions. I mean, he was beating kids that were, he beat a couple guys with decent records toward the end that were, so. But I mean, he's fighting guys with 9-5 records. He 24-28, beating guys with 14-14 records, 6-6 records. And it's like, they threw that poor kid to the wolves. I mean, they called him up, and of course his manager and Jesse are going to go, oh my God, I get a chance to fight in the UFC against Jim Miller? Oh, it's a chance of a lifetime, right? The kid's going to do it, So that's the problem. A lot of managers and fighters will just jump into the meat grinder. We've talked about this numerous times with not enough experience and not being good enough, period. You have to, as a manager and as a coach, look at a kid and go, you're going to get fucking hurt. No, you're not going to do it. We're not going to do it yet. No, you haven't proven that you even remotely belong in the UFC, let alone the Contender Series or anything else. So, no, slow the fuck down, right? You got to have very frank conversations with athletes and be honest with them. That's why you're their coach. That's why you're their manager, right? You're not there to make money off of them. If you train them correctly and bring them along correctly, you'll make a lot of money off of them, and so will they. But, that's the problem.
So you're saying if you were Jesse Butler's coach, manager, or even Jesse Butler himself, you would have not taken that fight. You would have said
the only thing that would have made me say, yeah, let's take the fight was if Jesse Butler was a buzzsaw and was knocking the fuck out of everybody and wasn't vulnerable to getting knocked out himself, right? Yeah. That's when kids get hurt. You know what I'm saying? That's when they get hurt. And the kid got folded in 23 seconds.
Yeah.
That's what you get. That's what you get. And Jesse Butler should, consider who he has training him and who he has, advising him, to be honest with you.
Yeah. That's freaking perfect, Pat. So
and anybody, and sorry to interrupt, but people are going to go, well, when I talk like this, people are like, Miletich is a complete asshole. Actually, I am. When it comes to athlete safety, yeah, I'm a dick. 100%. I'm a complete asshole. I will be outspoken about that. So.
Jesse Butler, talented kid, but he's no Bo Nickel, where he was just steamrolling everyone. He's no Khamzat Chimaev.
Well, the kid. It's this. It's if I were to give them the shadow of the doubt, it was, okay, Jim Miller's probably not going to hurt you and knock you out. He's probably, if anything, he's going to submit you. And because you're 8-0 on the ground, you've actually maybe got a chance against this guy, right? But he was not, qualified remotely in the stand-up area to be in there with anybody.
Talk about Jim Miller, Pat, because I don't even think it's much of a debate. He'll be joining you in the UFC Hall of Fame. He lost to Joe Selecki in April of 21. Since then, he beats Eric Gonzalez, beats Nicholas Mota, beats Donald Cerrone, retires Donald Cerrone, fights Alexander Hernandez. It's fight of the night. Hernandez does beat him, but Miller has a hell of a comeback there at the end. Almost gets the Hail Mary.
Which was what we called and said, if Miller's going to win, it's going to be like pull it out at the end, and because Hernandez is going to gas, right?
Yes, sir. And then beats Jesse Butler. So he's won 4 out of his last 5. Talk about Jim Miller. For a legend, a veteran like you, that's got to kind of warm your heart to see Miller still competing with the young guys here, right?
Definitely. And he might actually not even be using that much just for men.
Where did he has? I mean, everything's coming up Jim Miller right now. Not only is he fighting like that, he's 40 years old and can grow a beautiful head of hair. That's Did you hear the story about him? He, I believe it was 3 years ago, found out that he had been fighting most of his career with Lyme disease. And he said that once that got cured, he had so much more energy and he felt better than he did when he was, in his early 30s. So
yeah. There's a lot of people that are suffering from Lyme disease that don't even know it.
Don't even know.
Right.
All right. Speaking of veterans, Chris Weidman, a man who I was certainly a huge fan of back in the day, the man to dethrone Anderson Silva not once but twice. Then he goes on to a nice little title reign there. I believe he defended either 4 or 5 times. And then Rockhold beat him up pretty bad, and he hasn't looked the same since. And then he absolutely shatters his leg in a pretty grotesque, disturbing injury. And you would have thought he was done. He already did not look great. And then he destroys his leg. He's back. He's back at least for one more fight. He's going to fight Brad Tavares, I believe, coming up here in August. I think Tavares rolls him in that fight. I think pretty much anyone in the middleweight division rolls through this version of Chris Weidman. No disrespect intended. He's a legend. Possibly another guy who joins you in the UFC Hall of Fame someday. What are your thoughts on Weidman coming back? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you understand where the hunger and craving to get that? There's no way he's going to get his title back, but he wants to, and he believes that he can. What are your thoughts on that whole thing?
Well, look, I'm not one to tell somebody what to do. I'm not in his camp. I'm not his coach. I'm not his manager. The horrific injury, all things considered. Throw a titanium rod in the tibia, and you've got essentially an indestructible tibia at that point. So he's good to go in terms of that. I mean, it just comes down to longevity. What's he putting in his body? What supplements is he on to rebuild everything, to go backwards in time, so to speak? And there are substances out there that people can take that are perfectly legal, that are very powerful, to allow people to go backwards in time and regain their athleticism and things like that. But there are limits, obviously, at this point.
Yeah. Where do you draw the line? And maybe it's a case-by-case thing, like you said. Where do you draw the line when you're coaching a guy, managing a guy, probably very close friends with the guy, and what he's saying to really anyone but him sounds crazy? And again, no disrespect, but it's insane. And he's been doing it for years, and he just did it yesterday on the Ariel Helwani show, where he's like, "I will be middleweight champion again. I'm gonna crush Tavares. I'm gonna crush the next 2 or 3 guys that they give me, and then I'm gonna fight for my title again. I'm gonna be middleweight champion again." No, you're fucking not, Chris. Unless you became the Bionic Man during your surgery, you're not. Where do you what do you do if you're coaching, managing a guy like that? Do you just keep feeding his ego and say, "Oh, sure you can"? I don't. Yeah.
Well, I think you got to go by a fight-by-fight situation, right? Chris Weidman, a guy who did reach the top and did well for quite a while. I'm certainly, again, I'm not involved in that camp. I don't know what Chris is looking like right now, all that sort of stuff. Very rugged, very tough guy, very accomplished wrestler, all those things, we have to take into consideration. When George Foreman came out of retirement and everybody went, dude, are you high? He was 42, 43, 44, 44, I think. And I had a good talk with Michael Moore, I don't know, it was a year or two after he fought Foreman. And I asked him, I said, how hard did George hit? And he goes, go run face first into that brick wall and that'll tell you. Like literally, he hit that hard. Yeah. Now, of course, Big George was very unique amongst human beings, but at the same time, you never know, dude. We never know. We have to go off. How's he going to look against Tavares, and then I think everybody will know. So
that's really good. This is a fantastic show so far. I am really loving these answers from the MMA legend, and I know that the fans are too. You know what that reminded me of, Pat, was Randy Couture coming out of retirement to fight your boy Sylvia for the heavyweight title, and a lot of people said what I was just saying. There's no way you're going to be champion again. You're on the wrong side of 40. You have a nice cushy commentating gig. What the hell are you doing? Goes out, beats Silva, gets the title, gets beat up pretty bad by Brock Lesnar in his next fight, but that's what that reminded me of. And Randy didn't listen to the haters and the doubters because he knew that he could do it. So
sure, yeah, you just never know. In terms of the injuries and stuff, though, I know you wanted to address that with the tibia snaps. Anderson Silva, Weidman, and several others have snapped their leg bones and stuff. Angle of kick is super important. If you're going to get your kick checked, if you're not kicking correctly with the inside edge of with your shin bone, the tibia, and you turn the kick over too much, you're exposing the outside of the shin to the fibula, the weaker part. The angle of the strike is not mechanically correct, and the bones can snap much easier when that happens, because you're getting basically hit from the outside at a 45-degree angle against the weak side of the bone that has not been conditioned to smash into hard shit, right? Because you have microfractures. When you use your shins as striking instruments, you get microfractures in the bones, and then calcium deposits fill in and make them harder and harder and harder. Well, you're not kicking with the opposite side of your leg generally. And when you make contact with somebody's shin bone, or even an elbow, you can damage your lower leg pretty easily. And I think there has a lot to do with the injuries in athletes that have gone up more and more over the past few years, is due to lack of organic, powerful, concentrated nutrients in people's bodies. Because you look at they talk about, this is modern medicine, right? Talking about calcium deficiency. Well, it's not actually the lack of calcium. People will take calcium supplements and it doesn't do shit. It is the lack of silica that fills in the holes in the bones. And so people's diets are actually silica deficient. And so they're not getting the structure to hold their bones together, the calcium together correctly. So that's where the problem is. So when you talk to like real agriculture experts, that's what they talk about. Silica, super important, and bioavailable silica that the body can actually absorb and use in the bone structure.
Okay. Can you describe or explain to the viewers and to me a bit, because I'm not super clear on this either. Can you explain checking kicks? Because I know that that's something that they talk on the broadcast a lot. They will say, "Ooh, he checked that kick hard. That's going to hurt for the guy that was doing the kicking." I think you hit on that a little bit now, but from my understanding, that's getting the shin bone up there where it's almost kind of like a counter shot where a guy kicks you super hard and he's going to do far more damage to his leg than your leg if you position your leg just right. Am I on the right track at all, or how does that?
Well, it all depends again. So if I'm good at checking, I'm going to meet the kick. There's going to be obviously a clash of shin bones, but I want to take some steam off of their kick, and I want to move with the kick with my footwork while checking it. If I have the time, though, I can step inside of the kick and not even pick my shin bone up and just bend my knees so that their kick will hit and slide up my quad, so to speak, right?
Okay.
So it just varies, but ultimately I have to point my knee at the angle of attack. So a lot of people will make a mistake and pick their leg up, and they're not pointing their knee outward to the angle, generally about 45 degrees of the angle of attack. And so if I were to pick my knee straight up, they would kick the side of my leg, and that's how I how I risk breaking my lower leg on impact, or getting spun around in a circle like a top. You know what I mean? So it's an art. It's most definitely an art, and there has to be a lot of shin conditioning to be able to do that, because it's, me teaching a seminar at generally like a martial arts studio or something like that, where they're not used to low kicks and things like that, the Muay Thai stuff. I'll have them at the very end start doing shin conditioning, and they're tapping each other's shin bones and not digging it,
Yeah.
not enjoying it at all. So we call those folks butter shins.
How does it feel when a professional fighter with conditioned shins perfectly checks one of those kicks? Do they feel nothing? Do they feel no pain at all? And it's got to hurt a little, even if you check it correctly.
It depends. Right? It depends on the guy. When I fought Yasunori Matsumoto, he was a guy that I think had the world record for breaking the most baseball bats at the time with his shin bone. So he could snap, 6, 7, 8 baseball bats with his kick. If I didn't set up my low kicks on him, when he would check them, I felt like I was kicking literally a giant steel bar.
Jesus.
And it was no joke. It was no joke. He had seriously conditioned shins. So when you screw up on somebody like that, you pay the price, and it definitely hurts. So
that is really interesting. Yeah, thank you for explaining that. And we have seen a lot of these really bad injuries. Obviously, Weidman, Silva, and Conor McGregor. And I think, it's probably we are seeing people implement the leg kick way more than they did back in your day. I know that you did it because I've watched some of your fights and I saw you kicking legs, but not a lot of guys did it. They do now, and it is a great weapon to have. It is a great strategy because you can really, it's almost like putting the air out of someone's tires. You can really slow that down, and we are seeing these bad injuries. And speaking of Conor, I had episode 2 of The Ultimate Fighter last night. I watched it. It was fine. We had a fantastic fight. We had a sick flying knee, and Chandler's boys are up 2-0. If you're not familiar with the format, people watching at home, it is kind of cool how they did it. They had half the guys are prospects covering 2 weight classes. The other half of the fighters are veterans, guys like Austin Hubbard, Jason Knight, Roosevelt Roberts, and others. And they gave Chandler all the veterans, all the guys with a few fights in the UFC, and they gave Conor the prospects. And one thing I wanted to hit on, I know that Chandler is a guy that you've really taken a liking to, not only as a fighter, but also as a person.
Sure.
Chandler is a fantastic coach. I don't know if he's done a whole ton of coaching. I believe he trains at American Top Team or one of the gyms down there in Florida. But man, he's really good at it. And obviously, like you've talked about, some of this is scripted and they want to get their views, but Chandler really cares about his fighters. There was a scene where a whole entire another fight was supposed to happen for that episode, and it fell through for multiple reasons. And Chandler had to go up to one of his fighters who was literally stretching out, getting ready to walk out to the cage very soon. And Chandler knelt down, got on his level, and kind of put his hand on his shoulder and this guy was from Eastern Europe, so there was a language barrier too. And Chandler just kind of gave it to him easy, and he's like, "You're not going to fight in a few minutes, but you are going to fight in a few days. We're going to be fine." And fuck, man, I think that this show is just going to make Chandler's stock go up and up and up. I think if and when he beats up Conor, his stock's going to go through the roof. And then you juxtapose that to Conor, who just really doesn't seem to care about his fighters. Conor's there for Conor, and the advice he gives his fighters is very half-assed. He was sparring with the guy who was about to fight, and Conor was completely trying to change the guy's striking technique 10 minutes before he fights. If you would have been watching, you probably would have been cussing at the TV, because it's just bad, and it just feeds more into the narrative, which I think there's a lot of truth to. That Chandler is a genuinely decent human who cares about his family, cares about his fighters, and is a very good coach. And Conor cares about Conor, and that's really about it. And he's kind of a narcissistic douche, and that seems to be playing out every episode. So I know that you haven't been able to watch it a ton, but I would encourage you to watch it, because your boy Chandler is his character is really shining through. So
well, it just comes down to, you know, those who have been coached by great coaches. You know, that stuff sticks with you, and coaching techniques and you know, how to communicate, and you know, a lot of these other things. So Chandler's been wrestling since he was a little kid, right? All the way into being an All-American, Division I All-American. So he's been coached by great Division I coaches, great high school coaches, middle school coaches, all that sort of stuff. That builds, you know, throughout your entire life. So he's, you know, the University of Missouri coaching staff's great, you know, a bunch of great guys down there. And so that's what left a mark on Chandler. And, you know, of course, you know, being raised by good people, all that, whatever. But it teaches you. You know, for me, I was raised by coaches, football coaches, wrestling coaches. You know, those guys were like fathers to me. And so while I am far from a perfect human being, for the most part, that makes me lean in a way that I'm going to try and help other people, right? Because those guys help me so much. And that's just, once you get used to somebody actually giving a shit about you, that's, you can see it in other kids that are like, I'm looking for some guidance here. Or maybe they're not looking for guidance, but they definitely need it. Or they have massive amounts of potential and nobody's coaching them correctly, and you want to make sure that they, you know, if they're going to do a sport like mixed martial arts, which has devastating impacts when you're not good at it, you know, you want to make sure that these kids at least stay healthy enough to get through fights and get the edge on conditioning and diet and technique and, you know, all of those things involved. So it's, you know, that's the difference. Conor McGregor, from what I understand, grew up in a Dublin ghetto and didn't grow up in wrestling rooms and, you know, all that sort of stuff. Probably played soccer or something as a kid. Who got, you know, I don't know. But to me, that's the difference, right? That's the difference.
I love it. All right, last news topic. A guy who probably pound for pound is my favorite fighter ever, and certainly was a very talented fighter. Had some big wins. He beat Shogun Rua. He beat Vanderlei Silva. He beat Michael Bisping. He almost beat Anderson Silva. He was just a couple minutes away from beating Anderson Silva. First time they fought, Chael, the American gangster son from the mean streets of Westland, Oregon. But as talented as a fighter he was, it was his mouth that really made him famous. And it's a guy who does a decent amount of talking for a living. I just came to love that. He is in a bit of legal trouble, and the details are a little bit blurry, but he beat up, I think, 5 different people in a hotel lobby, and it did not look good. He came under a lot of fire, and then it came out about a week later that and this is the part that's not super clear, he was either protecting his wife or at least protecting his wife's dignity, and that's what led to a guy who really hadn't had any issues with things like public violence and not like the Diaz brothers, who it seems like every other week the Diaz brothers are getting in a public brawl with someone. But he's going to go to trial, and his trial is has a date set. It's starting very soon. The trial will be televised. There will be a big spotlight on that. It's going to be a trial just by judge. There's going to be no jury. I personally, and then obviously we'll get your take on this, I wish Chael the best. I think, it's kind of a state by state thing. Some states, if someone is threatening you verbally, you can take that as the same as if they were attacking you, and so it just kind of depends on the laws and everything. But I wish my boy Chael the best. Like I said, he's probably my favorite pound for pound fighter ever. And I certainly wish him the best. What are your thoughts on that whole thing, that whole legal thing brewing, and the whole trial coming up and all that?
Well, I haven't seen. Is there surveillance footage of the situation?
There is.
Did anybody throw the first punch at Chael?
Yeah. There's a little bit of surveillance video, and from my understanding, the rest of the video is being withheld and will be seen during the trial. So
it just comes down to this. It doesn't matter who you are. You have to be able to show that your safety or the people that you love, your family, were either in danger or your life was truly in danger, to be able to inflict damage on other human beings. Generally, it can't be the way they've changed laws nowadays. I mean, while I agree there are a shitload of people out there who need to get the shit knocked out of them to change their attitude and so they don't run their mouth, that is not the case anymore in the United States of America. So you have to be able to show that, your safety or your life were in danger. And that would be easy enough to establish if a couple guys came after me and I defended myself and put them down. Then you've got to also be able to contain yourself once the threat has been eliminated, not inflicting even more damage on top of somebody. So when people say, oh, you need to register your hand as deadly weapons and shit like that. No, that's not the case. Now, a judge might, an individual judge or jury of people may look and say, well, you were a world-class fighter at one time and you shouldn't have done anything. Where they can't say that is if I'm actually being attacked by people and I defend myself. But if they were not attacking Chael and he started inflicting damage on them, he may have some serious problems on his hand.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Let me ask you this, and I've seen it a little as we've hung out, especially in Beddendorf. For the most part, the town worships you. Everyone's super happy to see you, but every once in a while, some idiot will come up to you and say something or look at you, and this moron thinks that they're gonna pick a fight with the UFC Hall of Famer Miletich, or at least mess with you a little bit, and you don't take the bait, and so how do you, as a trained killer, as a guy who could just rip the entire bar apart, how do you keep your cool? Because some former fighters can't do that, and I mean you see red and you snap. Is it a lot of yoga? Is it meditation up there on the farm in North Dakota? How do you?
No, man, it comes down to experience, and something that once I became a professional fighter, I focused and I stayed out of the places, number one, where those things would normally happen. But as time went by, I don't know how many years it was after I had become a professional fighter, and I was, I believe, already in the UFC, if not UFC champ at the time, and I had to defend myself against literally a rugby team, and I really hurt some people really bad, and I really didn't have a choice, and there was no surveillance footage back then or anything like that. but I had to defend myself, and I hurt a guy really. I hurt a lot of them, but I hurt one of them really bad, and he had several skull fractures, and he was in a coma, and they put him on life support actually, and so that was a very scary time for me because you don't want to do that to other human beings. You just don't. So I know what my capabilities are, and I know that it's too easy to hurt the average human being, even a guy who's, in really good shape, a big guy, a strong guy, whatever. Humans just don't know how to fight. We're the only animal born on this planet with no self-defense instincts unless we're actually trained how to do it. So when somebody's drunk and being an idiot and trying to pick a fight with a guy who's got a lot of qualifications and a shitload of experience in terms of fighting other world-class fighters, it can be a really, really bad combination. So, I had to learn the hard way, even though literally I didn't have a chance. I didn't have an option. I was still potentially looking at manslaughter charges if that guy would have died. Luckily, he healed up really well and all of that. But they just don't. Sometimes people just don't care. If you win, even if you were in the right, you can end up going to prison for 25 years, and that's not something I want to deal with. I'd like to hang out with my kids.
And I'm sure your kids would like to hang out with you too. All right, we ready to break down some fights here, buddy?
Let's do it.
All right, UFC 289. It is a loaded card, and I'll just mention this now before I forget. We will be doing a live episode. Our good friend Steve Houston will be filling in, co-hosting. We have here's the guest list so far, Pat. We have Tim Hernandez will be there. Dominic Martin, he's been a staple of most of the shows. He's gonna be there again. We have Ryan Houston. It's Steve's nephew. Going to be making, I believe, some kind of a appearance, and a couple other MMA personalities in the area. That'll be at Bulldog Arms from 6 to 9 in Bettendorf, Iowa. So if you're in the Quad City area, come on down to Bulldog Arms. That's in Bettendorf, Iowa. There's going to be free barbecue, ribs, potato salad, beans, and we're going to have a very fun live show and do some stories, do a beer chugging competition, interview some fascinating MMA personalities in the area. And we should, they're thinking they might have a packed house this Friday. They're really promoting it a lot. And so if you're in the Quad Cities area, come on down. I would love to meet you personally. So, all right, Pat, Diana Belbita, Maria Oliveira, who you got here?
This was after digging into this matchup, it was not necessarily great quality of opponents, and it was funny. I got to the point. I was looking at Oliveira first, and I came to the conclusion that she got into MMA to secure a bikini modeling career. It's not to be too disrespectful, but then I looked at Diana Belbita's record, quality of opponents, all that sort of stuff, and then I realized why she was the underdog to a bikini model, and one that I'm not necessarily going to vote or bet on, of course, but God bless them both. So I lean a little bit towards Oliveira. Let's put it that way.
I lean toward Oliveira also. I don't know if it's not really worth an air horn, but Oliveira, the odds have essentially flipped on FanDuel, where Belbita was the favorite. She is now a slight underdog. Oliveira is a slight favorite. That's enough for me to put a small bet on Oliveira. But I'm with you, man, and it's just kind of, it's not sexist. It's not hateful. It's just the facts that women's MMA is nowhere near the level that men's MMA is. There are some fantastic female fighters. One of them is our main event, Amanda Nunes, probably the greatest female fighter of all time. But man, once we get past the top, maybe 10 girls in these divisions, it gets a little bit greasy. So I would not advise putting large amounts of money on any kind of low-level women's MMA because it can get messy real quick. David Dvorak is fighting. How do you say this guy's name? Is fighting
Steve
Ursig from Australia, mate. Who you got here, Pat?
Ursig's a tough guy. All Aussie fighters are. The New Zealand fighters. They're all really very, very tough guys. But his quality of opponents have been just awful. That's something that kind of sticks with me. Dvorak has beaten some very tough fighters before. He's got 2 of late decision losses. But he's a very tough guy. I lean towards Dvorak on this one. Enough that I would actually put a little bit of money on Dvorak, but maybe I lean towards Dvorak. Let's put it that way. But he's fighting a guy that's really untested, right?
Yeah, and we saw that with Butler, who the sports books respected. They didn't make Jim Miller a minus 900, minus 1100 favorite. They only made Miller about a minus 210 favorite. But man, there's something about that first UFC fight where we see there are levels to this game, and
right.
Talk about level of competition. It's a whole nother ball game, and it's really kind of sink or swim, and you find out how good of a fighter you are. Can you hang at the UFC level, or are you gonna get smashed? So
right.
Pat, this may be my favorite bet on the entire card. I love me some Blake Bilder here. I know that we broke down Blake Bilder's fight a few months ago, and you, I believe, had seen him fight live, and you were a big fan. I should have listened to you more than I did. I don't think I had a big bet on the fight in general. Bilder looked amazing, and now he is getting the respect from the sharp bettors. He has his lines moving all over the place. Pretty much every sports book has seen a pretty massive jump. He's at minus 250 now. I love Bilder here. I think that he has several stylistic advantages over Kyle Nelson. It's not just the line movement. Obviously, that's a huge deal for me. But watch some tape on this, and I think that he has Kyle Nelson beat just about everywhere. Do you agree with that? Do you love Blake Bilder again here?
Well, I think with Nelson, what I see with Nelson is anytime he goes up against somebody remotely tough, he loses. That's his quality of opponents have been, for the most part, pretty low. Bilder has faced much tougher quality of opponents, and he's got 15 straight wins as an amateur and pro. So this kid's for real, and he would be one of my, for sure, 95% sure he's going to win this fight. All
right. And I'll do a little teaching moment here. According to Blake Bilder's, I'm struggling with that last name for some reason. It's Blake Bilder's odds of minus 250 tell you that he will win the fight roughly. Tell you that he will win the fight roughly 65% of the time. That's what minus 250 tells you. So if you think he wins the fight 95% of the time, make that bet every time, because you're getting.
From my observances of both of them and their skill sets, their quality of opponents, the outcomes, all of it.
He's 1-4 in the UFC. His only win is a guy who was cut from the UFC years ago, Polo Reyes. When you talk about strength of competition, Kyle Nelson does not have it. Has not looked like a UFC level fighter. Blake Bilder only won UFC fight, but he looked like a goddamn UFC fighter when he stepped in there, Pat. So
right.
I like it. Well, we will be big Blake Bilder fans on Saturday.
And many times, with a guy like Blake Bilder and other fighters, a lot of times when I say quality of opponents, it doesn't just mean they have a good record. It means at the time you fought them, like Blake Bilder could have been 3-0 and fought a guy that was 12-2. The guy had a ton of experience and a ton of wins. All the above, and so that's something that people I think should take into consideration is, when you look at early in their career where they didn't even hardly have that many fights, they were fighting guys with quite a few fights and they had a good record.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, man, it makes a huge difference when you get in the cage the first time through the 10th time, and then after that to the 20th to then the 30th, and how you see the fight and how much everything slows down under duress, under stress, under exhaustion. The first kickboxing match I ever did, it was like absolute chaos. It was like I was in a room full of rabid cats being attacked by fucking 20 of them at one time. And you come out and you're done, you're exhausted, you don't how'd I do, coach? That sort of shit, where when, in other fights, then by the time you get to the UFC, a combination flies at you and you literally see it all happening in slow motion. And then when you go back and watch a replay, it was actually at blinding speed that it was all happening. You just were processing it so easily that it was a Matrix type moment, that everything was just super slow. So there's a big difference in all that. So the guys, when you're new to the fight game, very little experience, and you're fighting guys who have 14, 15 fights and they've got good records, that's a big deal to beat those guys.
I love it. This is a fun episode. I'm really enjoying the back and forth here. Ahory Lane, it's a great fighter name out of, I believe, China, is fighting Zahabi. Zahabi is the brother of a coach that I wouldn't necessarily put on the Mount Rushmore of MMA coaches. I know that some would. I think that besides George St. Pierre, he hasn't really churned out anyone amazing. But his brother is Zahabi, the TriStar Montreal coach, was George St. Pierre's coach most famously. So he's got his brother coaching him, obviously, kind of his protege. We've had some interesting line movement. Sportsbooks did not respect Zahabi. They made him the underdog, and he is pretty close to flipping to favorite here. You look at Unibet, he opened at plus 116, and now he's dead even odds with Ahory Lane. That gives me some interest in Zahabi. Not a massive move enough yet where I would max bet it, but probably a 1-unit bet for me on Zahabi. He's very technical. You would think, just with who his brother is, that he'd be a very technical guy. Do you agree with the line movement here? Do you agree with my 1-unit bet on Zahabi? What do you think here, Pat?
I think it could easily be a toss-up. You look at Ahory Lane, and he's got 22 fights have gone to decision, which he's won 15 of those. So he's pretty good at strategically fighting and placing himself ahead on the scorecards and things like that. He's also got I believe 9 knockouts. Never been knocked out. Not great on the ground. He's a Chinese fighter. They're a little behind the curve when it comes to the overall, I think, submission game. So that's somewhere where Zahabi, I think, has his best chance of winning, and I'm sure that they're probably thinking that way. So I mean, I could see betting money on Zahabi. It's not a fight that I necessarily would want to bet on if I was a professional bettor, but I could see Zahabi pulling that fight out, even though he has a fraction of the fights and all of that.
I agree. Next up, Jasmine Jasudavicius. That is a both have amazing fighter names. Jasmine Jasudavicius, Miranda Maverick. Miranda Maverick is a fairly decent favorite. She is going to be about minus 320. Jasudavicius is going to be coming back juiced at plus 235. You're riding with the big favorite, Pat. Is this possibly a Miletich parlay piece, or you think the underdog has a shot?
I definitely lean strongly towards Maverick. I mean, she's lost some close decisions. The Barber decision was a bit controversial. Yeah. So, and Maverick and Barber, both very, very, very good fighters. But Miranda Maverick, I think in my mind is almost pretty much a lock in a parlay for me.
All right. I agree. I think that Maverick is against anyone who isn't maybe top 5 or 6 in this division. She beats him, and she beats him handily. She's very talented, Pat. She has above average striking, strong. Oh, fuck, built like a. She's
very good wrestler.
To see what I did there, but extremely strong, built like a horse. We'll say that. That I don't think she would be offended at that at all. She's very talented. Speed, strength. She's just, I think, physically, when you look at her in there, she's just physically just better than a lot of these girls. I think that probably a lot of it, some of it she was born with, some of it I'm sure that she trains like a monster.
Her father, who I have great respect for her father. Her father's a great guy, and they have a cattle ranch down south, and they're good people, real strong, good family values. And he worked with her and her siblings a lot on just fundamentals. You know, he's a great guy, and so I got to know their family really well. And there's a reason that she's doing well. She's obviously grew up in a competitive household, hard work on the cattle ranch, things like that. So that's not everybody gets that opportunity to live a life like that. So there's a big reason why she's doing well. So the only thing that I would say is that striking fluency needs work with Maverick, a little more footwork and defensive skills, things like that. But she's a lock on this one, though, definitely.
Yeah. That's interesting. You have a relationship with their family. Yeah, Maverick, very high IQ, very high character, humble but confident. Anytime I've seen her in interviews, so yeah, it seems to be a real good family. She comes out of there. That's an interesting detail. So what are we looking at for the Miletich parlay here, brother? I imagine you have Maverick in there. I imagine you have Builder in there.
Yeah.
Would you put Dvorak in there?
You know, that's one. Let me go back and look at the numbers on that again real quick. I really think Builder, I really, based on quality of opponents alone, I mean, I think he's almost a lock. I really do.
Builder and Maverick are in mine. I certainly wouldn't mind maybe throwing Dvorak in a kind of more of a fun parlay, but if I'm trying to make money, which I am, so far Maverick and Builder are the only ones screaming at me that I would need.
Yeah, I don't. Dvorak's. That's a tough one to consider a lock for a parlay. Yeah.
And what a lot of people do, Pat, more casual bettors, is they see a big number like a minus 300, minus 400. They just put in the parlay because you get 5 or 6 high odds favorites. Surely they're all going to win. We caution people, don't put malarkey in your parlays. We cautioned people last week. We said he probably wins, but it's not minus 500 favorite. I'm pretty proud of us, man. And I received some very good feedback from the viewers. We said we loved Karine Silva much more as a parlay piece at minus 220 than we did minus 500 Jamie Malarkey. We got that fucking right.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did. And unfortunately, her opponent's knee got it wrong.
Oh, geez.
That was a bad one.
Yeah, you could see it snap on the TV.
Yeah.
This good stuff. All right, we have a guy that you are a big fan of, Pat, and I'm interested to see if you will disagree with the line movement here. I always welcome the friendly debate, as I know that you do too. Chris Curtis, you're one of your a guy that you really like is fighting Imavov. I got to back Imavov here. We've seen his line move pretty strongly. Started out as a small favorite, is now a very solid favorite at about minus 155. What do you think here, Pat? You gonna disagree with me here?
I think, both guys are pretty decent on the ground. Both guys know their way around the ground very well. Both guys very good strikers, very proficient strikers. Chris Curtis is a guy that, you know, a guy that's been finished, twice in a very, very extensive career of 40 fights, dude. That's a sick number.
Yeah.
I can definitely see this one going the distance, where Chris Curtis does quite well. He's lost certainly some decisions, but he's also won more decisions than he's lost. Both have had very tough quality of opponents. I think Curtis has had to deal with more, obviously, because of the record. But I look at Chris Curtis at 9-2 in his last 11 fights, bro. He's tough for me to bet against, even if the numbers are going the other way. It's not something that I wouldn't comfortably bet on that fight, probably, just because I know Chris Curtis, and you know, I think he had a little bit of a gas problem in his last fight. That was one thing, that he wasn't pulling the trigger like we expected, right? Yeah. And he also fought somebody who has made quite a resurgence, right?
Well, he fought Kevin Gastelum
who looks amazing.
And Gastelum is, that fight was set up for Gastelum to win. You're talking about a former guy who was fought for the belt and was needed a bounce back win, and he got it. And it was fight of the night. It was amazing. Both guys hurt the other multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
I had a big bet on Gastelum, so I was happy to see him edge it out. But Curtis did not make it fucking easy on him. Curtis is a dog, man. Curtis is a dog. And an interesting story, a guy who really struggled to get into the UFC. And you called several of his fights kind of in the regional promotions, and was really a guy who earned every bit of that UFC contract. He was at least,
and the way I look at it, Imavov is not Gastelum, right? That's the way I look at this fight quite a bit as well.
You think Gastelum would beat Imavov if they fought now?
Gastelum, in the way he fought Chris Curtis, would have beat almost everybody.
Okay.
I mean, he looked. I mean, even Rogan, when he interviewed him, he's like, "Holy shit, dude, you fucking looked. That's the best you've ever looked."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying is Gastelum. That was the best fight of his entire career.
Yeah.
Against Chris Curtis, and it was still a decision. And they both, as you mentioned, hurt each other several times. So that says a lot about Curtis in my mind.
Yeah. There you go. By the way, Chris Curtis and his teammate Sean Strickland just started a podcast that is, sure you would enjoy it. It is not politically correct. It's not woke at all. They are both two guys who love America and love to ruffle people's feathers. So I don't know. Maybe I would. Maybe somewhere down the line we can do an MMA Mobsters collab with those two guys, because I know
I think that would be fun. I think I would enjoy fire hosing their audience with real information.
All right. Well, I will get in my Instagram DMs and reach out to them, because the three of you are cut from the same cloth. You guys would and me too. The four of us would have a lot of fun. All right. Marc-Andre Barriault is fighting former Alabama Crimson Tide football star Eric Anders. Who do you got here, Pat?
Man, I've always loved Eric Anders. I mean, he played linebacker for the University of Alabama. They won a national championship. Spectacular football player. He's a lefty, hits like a ton of bricks. Gets himself into knockdown dragouts way too much, just because he's so damn tough. And so rugged that every fight he has turns into a straight up fucking street fight, literally. I lean a little bit towards Barriault, but it's really a toss up. I think it's more of a toss up than people realize.
Yeah. Well, Miletich, in another life, you could have made MMA lines for sportsbooks, because you just perfectly described where the line is. Barriault is about a -140 favorite. Anders comes back into your life at about +120, and it's literally what you just said. It's a close fight. Sportsbooks are giving the slight lean to Barriault, and that's where it is. Not something that I'm running to my phone to bet. We'll see what the line does. See what fight goes to decision is doing. So fight goes to decision is minus 130. Fight doesn't go, plus 100. Two tough guys, Pat. If I was to bet this fight, if you gave me $100 and said you have to bet it on this fight, or the $100 vanishes, my favorite bet would probably be betting fight goes to decision.
Yeah, and so you're a numbers guy. So when I count knockout wins versus losses, submission wins versus losses, and then win-loss decisions, both of their numbers, not massively, but both of them have more finishes one way or the other than they do decisions.
Sure. So
I consider, you got to consider both of their toughness at the same time. But I guess doing math and does that tell you that it leans a little bit more towards a finish?
Yeah, that's a good question. The way that I look at that, Pat, is it certainly matters, but I keep in mind that for these, it's kind of fascinating with these guys. They will come out young and new, and they will fight in the caged aggressions of the world, those regional promotions, and they will. You talk about a guy like Anders and Barrio, two guys who are freak athletes, elites, all-American athletes for Anders, and they'll fight guys that they probably have no business. That guy has no business being in there with a 2-0 Eric Anders, and Anders will destroy him because he should destroy him. And even with Anders, he had a really cool story, like you just hit on. The UFC made life very easy on him for his first 4 or 5 fights. I believe you look at his first 4 or 5 fights in the UFC, none of those guys are even in the UFC anymore. They cherry-picked guys to make him look good. And then when he started facing higher levels of competition, like the Darren Stewarts, the Thiago Santoses, the Khalil Roundtrees, he was not finishing them. He was losing by decision a lot. So what did we learn about Anders? Tough fucker, very talented, but very durable. And so even when he would lose, he would check out this for a stat, Pat. Khalil Roundtree knocked him down 7 times. It was only a 3-round fight. Roundtree dropped him 7 times. I believe set a record for most knockdowns in a fight and never finished him. So that's something where I look at, you kind of have to take those numbers with a grain of salt, because when you're that talented of a guy, like both Anders and Barrio are, you should be finishing your first 10 or 15 fights, and then when you get to the higher level, the finishes probably come less often. So yeah,
sure.
Alrighty, we are moving right along. I believe we were in the main card portion of the fight. Pat, I'm excited for this fight. Nate Landwehr both these guys have massive followings. Nate Landwehr in his last fight fought David Onama. I believe that was one of the last fights that James Krause cornered before his whole entire world fell apart for doing a lot of illegal betting stuff that we do very careful to not do on this show.
He hasn't been found guilty of anything yet, though, so we can just say accused of.
Accused of, yeah, and certainly felt the repercussions in being banned from the UFC and losing his gym. But as far as criminal, has not. That whole situation, no one's really talked about it for a while. We haven't seen James Krause coaching either, nor will we. But it's interesting to see how that unfolds. Landwehr gets beat up pretty bad in the first round by David Onama. He then rallies, and instead of finishing Onama, he played to the crowd, and that's a thin line to walk, Pat. You can get yourself knocked out when you start showboating in there. You can turn the crowd against you. People, I don't know, man. It's I gotta say, it's a case by case basis. Sometimes cocky is a huge turnoff. Sometimes the people love it. Well, the people loved it. He had, I believe it was Salt Lake City. He had the entire arena on their feet, and he became a superstar by doing a bit of showboating in that fight. He now gets Dan Ige, who was one of the toughest guys in the UFC. You showboat on Dan Ige, he's gonna hurt you. So this is fascinating to me because Landwehr, and that's why I say it's a thin line. And UFC Hall of Famer legend Miletich knows better than anyone. It's a fine line, man, because now people see you as a showboater, so you kind of got to go in there and play to the crowd a little bit. But you can't fuck around like that with a guy like Dan Ige who will put you out cold. Let's get your opinion on this and everything I just talked about.
Well, I mean, both have fought very tough guys. When we look at Ige, he's fought a killer's row of folks, 5 KOs, 5 submissions, balanced attack, very good on the ground, very good with striking, But you look at Landwehr. Landwehr's a guy who, went undefeated in M1. You're fighting Russians. You're fighting Eastern Bloc psychopaths, right? So, I mean, I lean towards Ige a little bit in this, but, I mean, what are the odds right now?
The odds right now, I'm glad you asked, Pat. They are, Ige opened up at minus 245. He's now minus 265. So a little bit of movement. Landwehr is plus 200.
I think that's almost disrespectful towards Landwehr. I mean, I really do. Landwehr's no fucking joke. He's tough. That's not a fight that I don't think I would bet on at all. Now, you're the guy that does the live betting and stuff. I can see that coming into play in this fight, but
yeah,
big time. I'm not picking Ige as a winner and putting a shitload of money on it just because Landwehr's, like I said, he's undefeated against frickin' in M1 against frickin' really scary fucking people with good records.
Yeah, I would, as of now, I would probably have a 2-unit bet on Ige. Here, like you said, very tough. Has done some big things in the sport even before he came into the UFC. Onama put it on him bad, man. And I think Onama's issue was Onama very talented, very raw, and just hadn't learned to pace yourself, control the gas tank. Once Onama had him hurt, he went balls to the wall, as they say, and suddenly, at the end of the first round, Landwehr's still there, still conscious.
Right.
Got in Onama's head a little bit, and Onama pretty much melted there for multiple reasons. Ige's not going to do that, Pat. Ige, ton of UFC fights. Ige is very smart. He's has that high IQ, and he's tough. I think Landwehr, his biggest moment of his life, great moment, came because a young prospect beat him up really bad and then gassed himself out. And I think that Ige is the better fighter everywhere here. I think it's going to be fun. And again, I worry about Landwehr. It's enough of a job to have to fight Dan Ige. If I have to fight Dan Ige and worry about, boosting my brand as that fun showboating guy, too much to be worrying about when you're in the octagon there, man. Dan Ige right now would be a 2-unit bet for me and would possibly add on more to that. I think we see a fun fight. We see Ige beat him up pretty bad. I'm certainly excited to watch it.
Nice.
All right. Adam Fugit, or Fugit, as you certainly say, is fighting Mike Malott. Mike Malott, both guys are big prospects. This fight is on the main card, I think for good reason. And it will be interesting to watch. I think we will learn where these guys are at. I don't have a strong lean either way, Pat. I am a fan of both kids, both prospects. I don't love it when they match 2 prospects up so soon. I'd kind of rather they, I don't know, because I feel like whoever wins this fight is going to get a huge bump, possibly even go top 15 in the rankings. Whoever loses, it's kind of back to the drawing board. So I don't know. I'm not like mad about it, but you don't often see them match up two big prospects like this so soon. But whatever. Do you have a lean on this fight, Pat? Because right now, I would not bet on this fight. I think it's to be very close.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, neither one has had spectacular quality of opponents or anything like that. Both very talented, as you said, young prospects. And so when you refer to wish they would hold off and build both of them a little bit more to maybe a later clash, well, that's something that the boxing world understood years ago, when Americans actually had an attention span and you could build to a crescendo and build a story and all of that shit. But right now, if you were to do that to the American sports fans and build two athletes to like a fight 2 years down the road and let them destroy people along the way, and invest the money, and I understand there's a risk there for a promoter to build both these guys to a huge fight, but boxing used to do it masterfully, and that's how they got their super fights. If you did that to the American sports fans today in mixed martial arts, you'd have like an outbreak of epileptic seizures and shit like strobe lights. They couldn't deal with it. They'd be like, wow, why can't they fight now and shit like that. I don't know. So it would be like a strobe light going off on everybody. So yeah, I wouldn't bet on it either necessarily, but I lean towards Milat just simply because he's done better. He's undefeated in the Contender Series and the UFC, and that's, I think, where he gets the edge somewhat in the betting.
We should also probably hit on this. The UFC makes their grand return to Canada. I believe it was, well, I don't believe, I know that it was the political climate, the pandemic climate that kept them out of Canada. But
it was called a border that you couldn't cross.
Yep, unless you were wearing 18 masks. Yeah,
and have the boopity boops.
Yeah, unless you had 18 masks and 14 vaccines, you couldn't go to Canada. But so now we're here. Probably worth noting that Mike Milet is Canadian, is probably considered the top Canadian prospect out there right now. I can't name anyone else. So that's why he's fighting here. That's why he's on the main card. Can you talk about that? I know that you fought in the Quad Cities several times. And also worth noting, he is the only Canadian fight. No, Marc-Andre Barriault's Canadian too. So we have two Canadians fighting on the pay-per-view card here. What was that like for you, man, when you fought in front of the home crowd? Did it help you, or was it so much pressure that it was almost kind of a pain and you wish you were fighting in Texas or California where you didn't have to worry about potentially, letting friends and family down? That's got to be, for some guys, I'm sure it's a major boost. For some guys, it's probably a lot of unwanted stress. What was that like for you?
I enjoyed it because I could sleep in my own bed. I mean, for the two UFCs that I fought in Iowa, in Cedar Rapids, I could sleep in my own bed up until weigh-in day and just drive up, make weight, spend the night in the hotel up there in Cedar Rapids, and then fight the next day. But I never lost a fight in the Quad Cities. Never lost a fight in Iowa, and the only fight that I guess people could say I lost with Michael Nunn was the exhibition kickboxing match where it was kind of neither one of us were out to finish each other, right? So it was just more of an exhibition thing and out there having fun more than anything else. So I enjoyed it because I could sleep in my own bed, wake up, do my thing, So I think there's a lot of people out there who, when it comes to representing community, country, all that sort of stuff, everybody in the world's coming to your neck of the woods. I mean, there is some pressure there. I mean, when we fought one of the UFCs in Cedar Rapids, it was 8 fighters from my camp versus fighters from all over the world, and we went 8-0. So we enjoyed that, and we enjoyed having fighters come from all over the world and the country to the Quad Cities and fight us in in shows as well, and just putting it on them.
I love it. I love it. Great answer. All right, it's co-main event time, Pat, and I made some social media posts about this because this fight is fascinating to me, and I'll tell you why. If I was a sports book, which I'm not, I'm on the other side. I'm the sports bettor trying to make money off the sports books. And you give me Charles Oliveira, who had possibly the greatest run the lightweight division has ever seen. Conor McGregor never defended his belt. And, I mean, Khabib, legendary run, but left us wanting more. Definitely could have fought several more times. Didn't have to respect him honoring his family, obviously his late father, so on and so forth. Oliveira, man, for my money, who he beat Poirier, bad. Beat Gaethje, bad. Beat your boy Michael Chandler, bad. They were all finishes. They were all dominant. And when you look at, was always an all-world grappler, became a phenomenal striker. I mean, his power. Justin Gaethje to this day says no one's hit him harder than Charles Oliveira did. A jiu-jitsu guy. You give me him, and then you give me Beneil Dariush. No offense to Beneil Dariush, but I would have made Oliveira, man, maybe like minus 300 favorite. The sportsbooks didn't, and they made him about a pick'em. And then we have seen the Dariush line move from minus 110 to minus 160. That's something where I just kind of have to swallow my pride and everything that I thought going into this and say, well, I definitely was thinking about this the wrong way. And when I dig into it a little bit, we have seen Oliveira struggle with wrestlers. He got, I don't want to say lucky, but definitely got a good draw in that he fought a lot of strikers like Poirier and Chandler and Gaethje that he could control on the ground. We saw Kevin Lee take him down at will. Oliveira then tapped out Kevin Lee in the fourth round. If that was a 3-round fight, Pat, Kevin Lee would have easily won that fight. Oliveira kind of found a Hail Mary finish in the fourth round. We saw Islam Makhachev take down Oliveira at will, eventually submit him. I think that's probably what the sportsbooks are thinking, that Dariush can find those takedowns. Can he do it for 5 rounds though, without getting caught, without getting tired? I am fascinated by this fight, and I'm fascinated to hear what you think.
Well, Dariush is obviously no average wrestler. He's an Iranian wrestler, which is a pretty scary form of wrestler, without a doubt. Oliveira, I still lean towards Oliveira.
Okay.
No matter what. I think Oliveira can pull it out against Dariush. Dariush is exceedingly strong. I've had Iranian wrestlers at my camp back in the day who were good fighters as well. Kamal Shalarus, and so those guys they're a different breed. They really are in terms of wrestling. So that's going to give Oliveira some problems, I think. But I lean a little bit just slightly towards Oliveira. I'm not going to bet on the fight. In no way, shape, or form. But I think Dariush has some serious problems with Oliveira. I think Oliveira's fluent, too fluent for him striking. I think he's, good enough on the ground, obviously. He's got 21 submission victories where he's going to give Dariush some serious problems on the ground. So I think it easily could go the distance, right? That's a bet that makes sense to me.
I would respectfully disagree with you there, man. I think Oliveira is kind of an under machine, especially for a 5-round title fight. He's going to kill her. He's going to be killed. And I love it when we have friendly disagreements here. So let's get into this here. But I would just say that's actually my bad. This is a 3-round fight because it's the co-main event. I'm so used to Oliveira having 5-round fights because that's all he's had. 3-round fight. Winner of this fight probably fights for the title. So,
and Oliveira's only gone to four decisions.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, that would I don't as vehemently disagree with you as I did 30 seconds ago, because I forgot that it was a 3-round fight. So yeah, let's dig into that a little bit, Pat. So right now, fight doesn't go is minus 310. Fight goes to decision is plus 210. So yeah, if that's something that you like, you can get some juicy odds for it. So yeah.
Right.
And you were talking about betting Oliveira. I would be on the other side just because of this crazy line movement. But I will say this, Pat, if you're an Oliveira backer, you have to love what these odds are doing, because if you would have bet $100 on Oliveira last week when they dropped these lines, you would have turned $100 into $190. You make that exact same bet today, Pat Miletich, you turn $100 into $225. Same exact bet, same exact amount, but as the odds move toward Dariush,
Right.
their numbers got to get juicier and juicier. So,
Yep.
Any final thoughts on this? Because I do think it's a fascinating fight, and it's a guy who going to be betting Dariush pretty heavily just because I have to. When the line does this, I'm a little nervous because all the stuff that you talked about, how fucking dangerous Charles Dobronx Oliveira is. I'm gonna be sweating for the. I'm gonna be sweating. I'm gonna be pacing for that fight. I have to put a decent.
We can calm your nerves. We can calm your nerves because the last time he fought a really good wrestler from that region of the world, he got chewed up and spit out. How's that?
Dariush isn't Makhachev though. At least I don't think he is. But yeah,
he's not. No, he's not quite that. But he's a scary ass wrestler with some very good power. So,
I love it. This has been a really fun episode. All right, main event time, Pat. You ready?
Yeah. Yes, I'd love to get into it.
Amanda Nunes is fighting. She is, I think, pretty, especially after Valentina lost and the way that she did, you have to consider Amanda Nunes the greatest female fighter of all time. She beat Rousey. She beat Cyborg. She beat Valentina. So, I mean, any competition, you don't even have to guess who's better because Amanda beat them all. Pena, really the only one to beat her. Amanda wins the rematch. I mean, she's established herself as the best female fighter ever pretty easily. Irene Aldana, she's going to be fighting her. Aldana from Mexico. Very talented, a little bit lacking on the ground. If Nunes had a clear advantage here, I think it would probably be the wrestling and the jiu-jitsu. Right now, Amanda Nunes is minus 350. Aldana plus 255. Does Nunes roll here? Is it a closer fight than people think? What's your take on it?
Well, Amanda Nunes, if she does not go out and put Aldana on the ground, it significantly increases Aldana's odds of winning this fight. You know, I mean,
I agree.
You look at Aldana's got 8 KOs to her credit. She has very good hands. I think that you have to lean towards Nunes. I mean, you just have to. But it depends on how she goes out and strikes with Aldana and whether she mixes it up. And we'll just see. I mean, I don't even. I mean, while Aldana has beaten some pretty tough girls, she's not as of yet in Nunes's league. And I think what are the odds showing that basically?
Minus 350 for Nunes. Now, probably worth noting that Nunes opened at minus 400. Line came down a little bit, not drastically, but worth noting that the professional whale bettors thought that minus 400 was a little too generous and bet it down to minus 350.
Right.
So, sizable favorite. I don't know. Would you put her in the parlay?
I probably would.
All right. So do we have, and I have wanted to incorporate this into the show, every show, and I'm glad that I'm remembering. I'll get the habit now. What do we got, Pat? Is that are we going three leg parlay there?
We could even. I think we were at a point where we could even go with Ford just to be cocky.
Who would be your fourth?
Well, that would be. Let me go through this again here real quick.
Builder Maverick Nunes is what we got so far.
Builder Maverick. Yeah, there was one other that I was on the fence with, and that was Dvorak, I think, possibly. So yeah, it's three fighter parlay, buddy.
All right, loyal viewers watching all over the world, this is the Miletich parlay, and it gets a full. It definitely gets a cosign from me. Blake Builder, you put him in your parlay. Miranda Maverick, you put her in your parlay. Amanda Nunes, greatest female MMA fighter of all time, put her in the parlay. Plus 149 odds on DraftKings. You would turn $100 into $249. That is the MMA Mobsters parlay for the week.
There you go. There you go. In other news, I just wanted to point this out real quick in closing, and then you can send us on our way.
Yeah.
8 fighters were just released from the UFC. I'll run through them.
Yeah.
Real quick. We have Makwan Amirkhani.
We just had a bet on him to lose his last fight, so and he did. So
Batgarel, Danab Batgarel has been released from the UFC with a record of 12-5. We've got Tony Gravely with a record of 23-9, went 4-4 in the UFC. He's been released.
Yeah, and
I like Gravely a lot. I know him personally. Joseph Holmes has been released, 1-3 in the UFC.
Yeah.
Trevin Jones has been released, record of 1-4 in the UFC.
Jones was from where is he? He was from Guam. He was the only UFC fighter from Guam, I believe. So
not a lot of training partners from Guam. Yeah. Alir Latifi has been released.
We had a bet on Latifi losing his last fight. He fought that Waldo Acosta, I believe, and Waldo Acosta. Yeah, I believe that was no. Waldo Acosta fought Sherman. That's gonna keep on running down the list. I'm curious because I did bet on Latifi losing his last fight, and he did. I forget who he fought though. So
Monir Laziz has been released. We've got Omar Morales has been released. Went 3-4 in the UFC, a record of 11-4. And that would round him out, buddy.
That's a good news piece that we can do in the future. Because pretty much every week, the UFC will cut some fighters. Who the hell did Latifi just lose to? Because I had a decent. I remember that now. I had a lot on Rodrigo Nascimento, and that fight was much closer than I anticipated. Nascimento won a split decision. Kind of rough to cut Latifi after he exceeded expectations as a pretty big underdog, and he hurt Nascimento several times in that fight. And I was sweating when they were reading the announcement because I thought Latifi could easily have won. One judge gave it to Latifi, and I don't know. It's a cutthroat game, Pat, as you know better than anyone else. Latifi, even though he lost, he had a hell of a fight, but now he's gone. But
business is business, so that's the way it is, buddy.
It is business. All right. Miletich and I had a lot of fun with that 3-fight parlay. We'll have a lot more fun if it cashes. I would recommend putting a bet on that. Again, Kyle Nelson would be my pow. No, not Kyle Nelson. Blake Builder, who's fighting Kyle Nelson, would be my pow. Probably lock of the week. Blake Builder would be, and Maverick was Pat's lock of the week. I certainly agree with that. I probably in the order of our parlay, I like Builder the most, and then Maverick's right there. I like Maverick a lot too, and I like Nunes, but it worries me. It worries me she's getting up there in age a little bit. It worries me that Aldana is certainly talented. MMA Mobsters, like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. We have a Discord now. The Discord link is on our Twitter. I'll tweet that out again after the show. That allows you to hang out with me and Miletich a little bit more and interact with the absolute legend, UFC Hall of Famer, UFC champion, and also a guy who bets on MMA full time for a living. And so we're building that up. Miletich, this was a fun episode. I really enjoyed our back and forth, and it's always a treat to talk with you. Keep having fun up there on the farm, and we will see you next Wednesday for more UFC fights.